Hello, and welcome to the value of everything. Sorry for that sniff. Always seem to have a little bit of, I guess it's getting to the summer down under, and the pollen counts are going up. So, this is a topic I would really like to get into because it is the essence of economics and psychology in itself, and we really need to understand and discover drivers, mechanisms behind this, why people have these certain theories which come against these main directives in life, and how we like to sort of combat them, how we don't like them, all these incredibly frustrating and annoying things which occur in life. And really, obviously, you could determine as well, to an extent, a lot of unjustness which occurs. Now, the topic you've probably already seen anyway is scarcity. Obviously, on the other side of the coin is abundance. So, with a certain level of scarcity, things do get priced at a value. Without scarcity, we cannot have a model where people have any sort of desire or driver to purchase. So, for example, if we had seawater being very rare, I could put a price on it and say, hey, this is a litre of seawater. Would you like to see it? You could study it under a microscope. It will cost you $100. We have a little price for seawater, but obviously it is probably one of the most abundant things on the earth, and we don't really attain any price or value for it. Now, there is some other things in economics which obviously are quite frustrating as well, which is the zero-sum game, where both parties get into a dealing or a trade or whatever, and one has to come off as a winner and one has to come off as a loser. That's another economic theory which I do not quite believe in. I believe that there are certain levels of trade-offs which always occur, and even if it might be just on a pure material level that somebody does win, there is definite areas where you lose in terms of humanity, morality, and that will bite back at you in some strange or quite direct way. So, let's get back to our scarcity. Now, it's important, this scarcity thing, because obviously politics has a big driver on it as well. We have communism, who do believe that the world, to a certain extent, it has all of this major problems with it, in terms of how Western societies have fast food, they have buffets, they have incredible waste which gets thrown out on these abundant buffets, and all this other waste, these toys, and this landfill is just incredible misallocation of resources, which I tend to think there is a certain element of truth behind it. However, I like to delve a little bit deeper before we start to just purely point the finger at the principle of scarcity, and more so capitalism in this extent. So let's just have a little quick tap at that. So Western societies, they do have lots of abundance. There's the kids in Western society, anybody in sort of an upper lower class level would probably have a ridiculous amount of toys. In comparison to somebody that's a kid in a country like, I don't know, Indonesia, maybe just get a football or something like that, and you would say that they probably get highly well practiced and probably quite athletic from that aspect, in comparison to a Western kid who's got a multitude of toys that he never really masters and never really attains any kind of discipline to. But neither here nor there. There still is obviously this drastic amount of apportionment which is occurring. You could say to yourself, well, why should one kid have a lot more than another kid? These kids were never chosen to born into their environment. Why would they have all of these a certain amount of restrictions and another amounts who don't? And obviously, it's this is obviously not the kids' fault. This is really the parents' blame, and yada yada yada. So there's obviously a lot of little issues with that. Reason why a lot of people do have wealth and retain wealth is because they are good at managing their money and they don't spend it so rapidly. So they're very frugal, and the reason why they are millionaires is because they've been counting their coins and they've kept that budget in line month on month, and haven't gone overboard, haven't got themselves into deep water in terms of debt. Now, obviously, some people are born into wealth and things like that, but I would imagine the people that are very frugal are going to probably ascend a lot quicker to being rich, whereas the ones who have been born into money probably are going to descend much more rapidly because they haven't quite mastered or learned the real skills of working hard, and they haven't had that bitch of a lifestyle situation where they have run out of resources and all they've got is tomato ketchup in the cupboard. And they know, okay, well, I don't really want to face this problem again. I would much rather work hard and strive to have this certain level of abundance which occurs in my life. And obviously this does, to a certain extent, apply to other people. It applies to poor people. I always think that the poor people have once they do ascend to a certain level of wealth, they can really push themselves a lot harder in comparison to, say, the middle class, because they know what it's like to break through one barrier to the next barrier. Whereas somebody sitting in the middle class achieves a middle class job, really doesn't know how to really push themselves to the next level. However, that person from the very ground who's just cracked level 1 probably has got a better chance of cracking level 2, level 3, in terms of, I'm talking about in terms of wage brackets and things like that. So there's no denying that this scarcity pit or trap, which will eventually hit us, well, it hits us if we do not master our finances too well, whether it will be on a government level or whether it will be on an individual's level. It will come back to bite us at some point in time, whether we like it or not. And even though it can be a burden and an incredible frustration that people will try and recover their debts, and this trigger of credit expansion will come to an end at a certain point, we could come up with these theories to say, oh, well, I've got a new idea to stop this problem with scarcity. We can all live in a commune where we share and apportion exactly the same amount to everybody. We do lose with the certain levels of scarcity the reward mechanism and the fear mechanism as well. So there's obviously the greed mechanism, which means that if you start to accumulate a certain level of wealth, then you begin to get better riches, and you can get slightly better cars than your rusty car. And if you get less riches, then obviously you would not be able to afford these cars. It would become more expensive until you're having to get on the bus and so on and so forth. So there's one little point. I guess with economics and everything else, we do have scenarios where businesses, they will try their hardest to achieve the highest, well, managers in general will try to get the highest level of efficiency from their staff, and they'll squeeze them as much as they can, but to a certain level, just to keep the flow going on. So obviously they want to still attain happy staff so that they can be good to their customers, and they can retain the staff knowledge as long as possible, so they don't have a high staff turnover, because that can rapidly destroy the company's skill sets. And obviously, to retrain and hire somebody with big qualifications can be a lot more expensive than having somebody there who's worked from the ground up. So there is a certain level. So from a business perspective, this is something that probably a lot of people are experiencing right now, is that there is obviously a scarcity of customers out there. And we can obviously delve quite deeply into that problem. I wouldn't say it's necessarily an issue of the free market, but it's more so an issue of credit supply and distortions, and how the mechanisms of money and trade is being distorted by that, and people cannot do not have the allocations of resources as to what they did as the past. And historically, there's been massive misallocations of resources due to massive amounts of credit expansion. So we live in a world where we think that house prices should be 10 times average earnings and things like that. This is the case in Australia, but there are obviously places as well in the world which are like that. Okay, so we have a business, and they have a shortfall of customers, and in this business they have a certain thing they have to manage now. So they've got staff, and they have to keep these staff sort of as happy as they possibly can, but know that the profit levels are going down rapidly. Now, while the profit levels are going down, there is an issue, and there is a driver for more automation and potentially more outsourcing, because the cost base of this company is getting shrunken, and the cost base is getting is remaining the same, yet the profit side is shrinking. Now, whilst this is happening, the staff are finding themselves under more pressure. They're having to work potentially longer hours to get the work done, because they're people that are leaving, but they're not being replaced by anybody. Yada, yada, yada. There is certain regulations which are coming through. It doesn't really matter too much about the workloads too much, but you have all these things that are occurring, which is increasing the employee's workload, yet it is not really improving their pay levels. Now, this isn't necessarily an issue to do with capitalism. There is one major thing here, which I know obviously this isn't the really good answer, but it is still a really important answer, is that, well, a communist would say that these workers are being exploited. They're being exploited because of the economic system that is in place, which is forcing this business to make some really harsh decisions to keep themselves alive. And this business will, obviously, for a business perspective and a businessman's perspective, his priority is to keep his business working as long as it can. And obviously, to do that, he has to keep his customers happy as long as he can. And obviously, as well, keep his staff happy as long as he can. But as things get more and more tighter in the financial arena, he is managing a very vicious cycle where the customer base is going down, the staff have to work more hours, and he has to just try and potentially retain some kind of his own living. He's got probably like a boat or whatever he has to keep him maintained. So he is managing this cycle, and he's hopefully getting his business not to crash. But at this point here, he may be making certain promises to his staff that I will keep you on and all this kind of stuff at a reduced rate, but then I will increase your wages in the future once we come back. All of these little promises that might be made. Obviously, this person is trying to keep his business as open as long as he can. Maybe he can get through this tough time to eventually find pastures which are nice and green and new. However, from a communist perspective, this is where they would say, well, capitalism is starting to show its rear its ugly head, and it's here we have manipulation, we have the horrible side of people coming out now, where we're exploiting these people, these hard workers, these employees, and now which should really be paid more, are getting exploited now for the hard work that they're doing. Now, this is an interesting point. And really, the exploitation point is, I would say so, if you're being exploited by the use of force. Now, okay, in this economy, if you decide to quit your job, you're probably going to be looking for a very long time before you find another job. So you don't really want to just leave, and you don't want to have that big gulf on your CV either. But here's all the same. Really, the employees there probably should have a little bit of a sense of thinking, okay, well, I am on board a sinking ship, and really I can think to myself in a really lovely, rosy world that economies just continuously go up and businesses always succeed. Yet, really, in a correct world, there are business failures, and sometimes, this is obviously a very important lesson to learn for a lot of people, is knowing the right time to get out of a tough situation. And it is very important that certain situation that can happen. Who knows the amount of extra hours that you had to work on? You could have been doing a job for slightly less money, but you could have had a lot more spare time to spend with your family. You could have potentially been trying to set up your own side business. All of these little factors, which comes down to the actual individuals there, or the individual employees there, who could have gone, okay, well, that's enough's enough. Thank you very much for employing me here, but I think it's time for me to go. And really, it's the case of the brave people that choose to go, and then the more brave people go, and then there's obviously this tidal wave and a domino effect, and that guy's business, that guy's probably been good enough anyway, but he's obviously comes to the realization that he has got a failure on his hands, and he will shut shop and say, thank you very much, staff, I can't pay you anymore. At least I haven't made any promises that I would have done, and all that kind of stuff. And that would have come to an end before the situation would have prolonged, and people would have thought that everybody was going to get paid and all that kind of stuff. So things could have ended up quite amicably. Capitalism is really a lesson in failure more so than success. For every business that's been out there, I can't really grasp the statistics of it, but I'm sure that there's not many businesses that have been hanging around for longer than 100 years. If they have, then there's been some kind of government connection. And if you think of the amount of registered businesses out there and the amount of registered business failures, I would imagine that you probably got at least 10 times, 3 to 10 times the ratios of registered businesses to failures in the last 20 years. But somebody can just look at the statistics, but I'm pretty sure this is a good idea. So yeah, especially being in part of like smaller businesses, I think people would have a better degree that you've got a lot more of a risk situation going on. If you enter into a small startup business, you know that from 1 week to the next you could go under. But however, if you are on the correct ship, you can probably ascend very rapidly into incredible riches. So so that's just a little thing about capitalism. And really, like another thing here about people, I know obviously a lot of people don't like to do this, but if you feel like you can do something on your own or do a side business and try something on your own, it really, the capitalism model is there for you. It is there for you to try your luck, try your business, see how it goes, and if it fails, it fails, but really just to learn and understand how the failure works and then try again and try again. Eventually, some success will happen to you, and every time that you have a failure, it is an incredible lesson to you back in return to say, okay, well, this is where I've done wrong, but I've learned these important lessons. I've met these really good people. I've done this, this, and this, and we could try again. And that is the incredible thing. If you think of how the economy may be crashing now, it's up to those people, those self-empowered people, who are going to turn around and go, I'm going to try this now. I'm going to try this business. Maybe this business would be quite a good idea. Low running costs and not much risk involved, but a lot of hard work, I guess, from me from the start. But hey ho, I can produce something that's probably of some value to people, and let's see how this rolls. And yeah, that's just one of those little things with scarcity and the zero-sum game, which does exist, but it is a necessary thing of failure and scarcity. Those horrible things that we just do not like to hear. But really, we should be embracing failure and, well, not embracing it, but just sort of like understanding failure and really learning the lessons of failure, and not be really stigmatized of worrying about being a failure, but just taking the hit on the chin and going, all right, let's time to dust myself off and work out where I went wrong, and here I go and start again. Okay, so that's one element from the scarcity perspective. I just obviously mentioned about that harsh time where some people will get themselves into a little bit of a pit. I guess one of the areas would be one of the most dangerous areas that you probably can get into is where you just distort your state of reality so much that your only reward mechanism is, say, a drug, a narcotic. You will distort your sense of reality. Now, obviously, this is a very dangerous situation to be in, because you really now are in a situation of exploitation, because you do not have any other choice other than to stick with this drug. And this is where people can send you into a lot of dangerous situations that you really wouldn't have chosen to be in. But however, this is really a thing of where you have chosen to take that drug originally. I guess there may have been a lot of background issues beforehand before you have really got hooked onto this drug to make you feel so much better than your day-to-day life. However, in this situation, you are going to potentially find these characters which are going to come around and exploit you. Now, I would say, though, if you, in theory, are going in tough times and you are finding yourself in a car and you're sleeping in a car and stuff like that, and you are finding yourself on the side of the road or something like that, and you're trying to get somebody to give you a lift down the road, I do think that eventually you will find certain good people that will give you food, sustenance, and shelter. There is goodness and kindness in people, and there are certain little mechanisms of humanity which will come in and sort of, like, if you're really messed up quite a lot, you can still recover. And I guess that's a key factor of humanity. Like, as many times as you might fail and stuff like that, there are certain people out there that will try and pick you up, especially if you have been trying to help other people as well. It's the key to this little world that we live in, is that there are little people that will reach out to you, as long as you're good to other people, that will try and help you. But obviously, if you've been quite self-obsessed, when I say self-obsessed to the point of not helping anybody else out, very narrow-channeled minded in that respect of your own morality, then and everybody else's, then you will find yourself more so putting yourself into that situation. Hence why I don't think the real model of this zero-sum game where I win and you lose, or vice versa, is really a good methodology of approaching this world of capitalism. I believe that wherever you do a trade, I exchange my money for your goods. You and both I are both profiting immensely from that value exchange which has occurred. So, and we both walk away happy. Maybe we might have a little bit of, say if I bought something that's just very instant gratification-y and I walk away, maybe say like if I bought a drug off you, maybe I would have regret the next morning if I've got a hangover or something like that. But even so, at the time of the transaction, we both are in agreement that this trade is going to make both of our lives a bit better. So, I guess where Karl Marx comes from in that respect is that he sort of says that economies are doomed to fail, and there are business cycles which occur, which does necessarily mean that we will get ourselves to a state where we think that this asset allocation, this resource is becoming rarer or more finite, and there's a certain scarcity element which is occurring, say in the property market, and we do start to say, okay, well, it's time for me to really start buying another house. Maybe I should buy an investment property because this property market seems to be gathering quite a hell of a lot of pace. So we do have this thing called an economic cycle, where there is this thing of fear and greed, which are important drivers which occur in the markets. However, the wise and savvy ones will start to invest when the markets start to have crashed and hit the bottom, and people are in despair and think, oh my god, this is the worst market ever to be involved in. And when people start saying, oh, this is the best market ever, it's always going to go up and things like that, that's when a savvy investor will start to go, maybe I should really reconsider being in this market whatsoever. I think in the 1930s there was a stock trader who started to really get more investment advice from his shoe shiner, and then he thought to himself at that point, maybe now is the time for me to get out of this market. So there is certain business cycles, I'll say, in return to Karl Marx. However, it's not about this sort of zero-sum game where we all try to get to a point where everyone's wins and loses until we have one major rich person who owns all the land and owns everything and owns all the people and enslaves everybody. But we do have economic cycles. But obviously, we can't really deny without having to look at this properly, is that there is the distorters of the markets which is occurring. The governments are heavily involved in how we spend our money. We can't really deny that, because governments are in control of the legal tender, the way that we exchange value in this world. So everywhere that we look, we have a currency which is distributed by a government or a government central bank. And this currency can be increased or decreased in supply. The banking sector has an ability to double account entry the money supply as well, which can obviously create a hell of a lot of credit expansion. And there we have also is beautiful interest rates, which can be handed out to the people. So obviously that gets distributed by the major institutional banks, the investment banks, and then it goes down the chain until it goes to the retail banks. And then people realize that they can get personal loans to purchase cars for next to nothing, and the interest isn't abnormally high, so they don't have to worry too much. So the interest rates are increasingly lowered and lowered and lowered, and one of the methods that they do that is that they can sell their bonds, and they sell them to the marketplaces. So if the bond market is basically the government debt market, so the government issues a debt, so it's money that they request, and they will pay off in the future at a certain interest rate. Now, the government bonds are classed as one of the best assets, particularly if you are a very safe haven country like the USA. You would issue the bond, and you would say, okay, I'm going to pay back after a 10-year tenor, and I'm going to give you this interest rate on this basis. Now, the international bond market, so investors will purchase it, and they will see how much the asset is worth, and they'll rate it up and down, depending on how their risk appetite is. If they don't want risk, they really go rapidly into the bonds, and they don't really get too much of a yield. If they do want the bonds, if they don't want the bond, then the bond price becomes a lot cheaper, and they can. That means obviously when a government introduces more debt, it has to raise its interest rates to attract people to purchase their bonds. Now, obviously, what they've been doing recently is they've been printing money and getting themselves to purchase their own bonds, which is creating this beautifully low interest rate, which is filtering down into the investment grade markets. So we have an incredible amount of distortion of increasing money supply plus low interest rates, which is a rapid expansionism in terms of liquidity or money which is being spread into the system. And thus so we have a number of things which is occurring. We are having stock market companies getting this low liquidity, taking a loan out and repurchasing their stock value. So they're basically taking a loan out to increase the share price value without retooling, increasing the productivity of the company, maybe not even cutting any costs or outsourcing or automating, but just increasing the value of its stock by just getting more debt onto its books and just raising the value that way. And you can see how kind of strange that is, because it doesn't really seem like a model which really improves a business. So we do have those distortions which are occurring in the market, some rapid steroid-induced liquidity which is being thrown around the system. So anybody who is got the risk appetite or is willing to take on lots of debt can probably access a certain level of debt as long as they've got some kind of collateral or a fairly decent job. They can access this beautiful amount of liquidity, access it, and then they can start purchasing massive assets like houses or shares and things like that. So we do have a rapid market bubble which is occurring around the world. And obviously it burst to a certain extent where all that liquidity filtered into markets which were very risky. And then that obviously reared its head, and then that was going to filter out into all the other markets, into the banking sector, everything else. It starts to eat itself, because once those risky assets start to blow up, then the banks starts to look a bit dodgy themselves. They have to raise interest rates to get a higher yield and a higher profit, and people can't afford it, and then it's just this rapid bite-off bite. Now, if we didn't have if we had a free market currency and it was just a thing that wasn't distorted, then we wouldn't necessarily have this rapid expansion of credit expansion which was going into the market. And people would really be just assessing assets like house prices at a very normal rate. If somebody was loaning, or if somebody was crowdfunding, or somebody was going to the bank to get a loan for to purchase an asset, then there would be a certain level of research that would happen. I know this happens nowadays. People just have a credit rating, and they would work out their feasibility of paying off this debt over a specific space of time. Now, obviously, I think the credit rating of people has been probably reduced quite a lot. I don't think there's, in the past, you used to have to wear a suit and go down to the bank manager and have a conversation with them, and they would assess your personality. Plus, they would obviously look at your records and see how you managed debt in the past, and see how you paid off, and see what your job is currently. Really, you're just a statistic now, and you can just attain a loan very rapidly at a rapid rate. At a low rate, in fact. There would be, and then obviously there would be with a bank, and a very good prudent bank. A prudent bank would go, maybe you are not quite. Maybe this loan is a little bit too much for what we would like to give. If we give you this loan, I think it will be irresponsible of us, and it could land you in a financial stressful situation yourself. So where you have requested 100,000, we will only allow you 70,000. So you're going to really have to reduce the size of the property that you are going to get, and you're going to have to sustain yourself within these realms. And albeit you will purchase this property, and because we're not living in a credit expansionist world, you will find that you would live in that property. It wouldn't really rise too much. There will be a certain level of property. There'll be a little bit of a thing about populations, and a little bit of that, and a little bit about how home buildings, and a little bit about what land is being released onto the market. But really, it would all be based upon those sort of correct drivers, more so than the actual credit expansion which was occurring, where the banks would just say, "Yep, you can have that loan. Here you go. Buy off that person, and you can increase that size." So obviously, this is all really where a lot of our issues are occurring in capitalism right now, where we are basically having misallocations of wealth. Now, wherever we see things like a depressed asset, so an asset value which is rapidly hitting the floor, like oil has been recently, what we're seeing there is we are seeing an economy which is, energy is the fundamental driver of an economy. If you have high energy consumption, you are seeing that there is a rapid demand for that energy, and that energy obviously is producing goods. It is creating value for other people, and vice versa. And that is obviously the number one economic driver of an economy. Now, once we see that asset depress itself and start to shoot down, and I know that there is OPEC consortiums which will try and keep the oil price at a certain level and not let it crash down too rapidly, and they'll just keep they'll restrict the amount of supply that is out there, and yada yada yada. But once we see certain assets start to deflate massively, that is obviously an economic signal to say that people are not purchasing as much fuel as what they did in the past. The industrial sectors, the Chinas, are not consuming as much fuel as much, are not making as much plastics as what they did beforehand, and there has been a definite retrenchment in the demand, and obviously the supply which has come onto the market has gone beyond the demand. So even if the supply has been restricted, and obviously the supply is in a bit of a state in terms of being at a peak oil status, so the supply of oil is really getting tougher and tougher now to get out of the ground. I know that there's been certain discoveries which are occurring, but still it takes a little while to get that oil from the ground. So there is pricing signals which occur in the market which obviously tell us some important things, and where we see rapid deflation in a market, that is obviously a price discovery mechanism which is occurring in the market. And obviously a price discovery mechanism is happening as well when something's shooting up. But you've got to, obviously, where you see that there's governments and banks which do like to really do credit expansion to a rapid degree, that potentially more so you're seeing where you see expansionism, where you see China releasing government statistics saying that they are in double-digit growth GDP levels. Really, that's where you should be questioning more so. And where you're seeing more so, I would say the truth, is where you're seeing a rapid deflation in a market right now. Now, this is obviously because of really where the media is going. The media sort of hums and chars that the stock markets are going good, the stock market prices are getting better and things like that. So they will keep on harping on how well everything's going economically. However, we do get pricing signals which do occur, and they do tell us a certain element of truth. And this goes back to obviously scarcity and abundance. So yeah, there is very interesting parts of the economy that happens, and capitalism just will hit in at any point. Now, if you think of communism, regardless of how they'd like to create a abundant society of plenty of goods that occur in the world, they still will have a scenario where they'll have people queuing up for bread for long periods of time, because there is the pricing discovery mechanism which will still occur, and it just doesn't rule out any sort of regime or anything else, is that where there's seasons and there's changes in the market, and sometimes you get good crops, sometimes you get bad crops, supply comes in, supplies runs out, you will have, even though you should be allotting every family like a loaf of bread every week, you will potentially have a situation where you may have more so one week because of the season change, and you may have less so another week because of the season change, and potentially maybe you've made some mistakes in terms of storage, or there's been disease, yada yada yada. So you will have queues for queuing up for bread, even in your communist style regime of having resources supplied to everybody, just because there is a pricing mechanism which has to occur regardless of any situation that is people in. And obviously the price that people pay is that they have to queue up for a loaf of bread, and then obviously some people have to queue up for so long that they never get a loaf of bread anyway. So the point I was trying to get to eventually is that there is a price to pay regardless of any situation that you're looking at. But probably the more realistic situation to be in is to walk down the street and go, loaf of bread is double the price this week. I probably will choose not to buy it, rather than for you to queue up in a long queue to see all the shelves empty, and you've got just some rice crackers left over or something. I don't know, whatever is left over. So yeah, it's one of those situations, and scarcity is a bitch, but it is there for a certain reason. And there is obviously, with having scarcity, I think there's some very valid and important things which happen. I don't like driving my car where the fill-up tank starts to flash on me. I remember going on a road trip with the lads, and one of them forgot to fill up before we left. We got over, we went to Europe from London, and we drove all the way from London all the way down to Dover, went across at Calais, and then it was at the start of the journey we got the light flashed in, but we was running out of time, so we got across to Calais and the light's still flashing, and we're thinking, oh my gosh, how long is this going to last? And we got all the way from France to Brussels, because we still couldn't find any petrol station. But through that time, I and everybody else was in a really nervous situation of being in a foreign country where we would probably have to speak to some kind of mechanic on the road in the Prussian, whatever language they were speaking, and we would be in a horrible little situation. We would have had to like crash there for the day and all that kind of stuff. And it's just one of those little situations of being resourceful and and things like that. Now, fortunately, we did find a petrol station, but it was a very stressful, nerve-wracking situation to be in. As it is when you forget to charge up your mobile phone and you leave for the day. It is an annoying situation, but it does put us into a certain degree of being resourceful in the future and going, okay, well, I need to be a little bit more foreplanning with this mobile device, and I need to put it on charge before I go to sleep at night. So I wake up with a phone which is fully charged, and I can check my emails throughout the day and all that stuff without having to worry about a depleted battery. So, and obviously this is the essence of, say, like where environments, say like the Europeans have been in some very harsh environments of winters. They've had to be resourceful. There's obviously a scarcity during winter, so they've had to really farm the lands, have these little stockpiles of food so that they can sustain themselves through the winters, and really master the land. And obviously that is probably one of the really important driver of our brains. So maybe the tribes in the winters who weren't resourceful got wiped out because they didn't really forward plan. However, the ones that were resourceful and they did forward plan their stockpile of foods, they remained. And there's this element of delayed gratification. Oh no, I think I've gone the wrong way. Never mind. So, here we have this amazing situation which occurs, and I would say this scarcity and abundance situation does have certain drivers on our intelligence, I would say. We are the environment that we live in. And if we lived in an environment of Eden where everything was abundant and there was no pain and there was no effort required, what kind of people would we produce? I would suggest to say that we would produce some very instant gratification-y kind of people that are all into themselves interest and not really applying themselves with too much in the terms of virtues and trying to be resourceful and all that beautiful stuff. So communism in itself is a way that you can manipulate the person into being probably, I would say, to a lot more extent worse than what they really should be. It has these beautiful ideas of really freeing the world and being and stopping oppression and exploitation. However, I think that probably the exploitation which is occurring is upon the people itself, as to think that the world that they live in can be really full of abundance, whereby it really comes down to the individual whether they have an abundant lifestyle or not. And really the terms of economics, where you fly a plane and everything else, is that you are economical with your resources and you try to utilize these resources in the best methods that you can. So obviously there are people that buy these massive boats that have waste lots of fuel and things like that. But in theory, most people are trying to be as resourceful as they can with their devices and with their all the resources that they have. So that is really the driver for them. Now, if everybody was allocated a house and everyone was allocated a car, people really haven't worked or strived for any of those resources. And you'd always say that if somebody was like, say if somebody, you was born into a rich family and you was given a house and a car and all this kind of stuff, you really wouldn't have too much of a respect for any of these things that you would have. I mean, obviously you would say, okay, I respect my family for giving me all these lovely goods and everything. But beyond that fact, you would say to yourself, okay, well, I haven't really worked hard for any of these resources, so who gives a damn if the place burns down or anything like that? I'll probably get given another house by my family or whatever. There isn't any sort of respect of your own property, which occurs when you do have this beautiful thing of working hard for your resources. Now, if you were in that situation where you do work hard for your resources, I remember obviously one of the best lessons that you could ever think of is when you first have a job and you work hard towards it and you get given a wage, and it's like, I mean, maybe sometimes that first wage you think, oh, okay, this wage is pretty impressive. I would say it was always interesting to buy that first thing. So say if you bought yourself a stereo or something like that, you would really prize after that item and think to yourself, this thing is really worth every penny that I paid for. So this thing is amazing. I'm going to really take care of it, and really you're going to handle it with utmost care. You're going to just dust it off every week. There's just there's so much care and attention which happens to things that you've worked hard towards and strive towards. Whereas if that didn't occur, then you do have a situation where things just do not get looked after. So here we are. We're just we're just hitting all of these levels. I want to just go into this other one because I'm always a little bit phasey on this one myself. So I just want to try and explore this one of the zero sum game. So in the zero sum game, we have this is the economic principle by Karl Marx. We have somebody that owns all the land, and there's the people, and he can start to exploit the people on the land for ridiculous amounts of money and things like that to work for them. Now, if there was any kind of competition or anything that was going on between that person who owned the land and any competitor else which was nearby who owned other land, then potentially there would be some kind of competition for wages, for one. So, or certain living standards. So one person would say, okay, well, I'm only going to work you for this amount of hours compared to this hours. So you do potentially have a scenario where people are going to work you for a lot different hours. Or potentially one pays you more than the other one. Now, obviously, if there is that possession of land itself, you can potentially work hard for a certain amount of time and then be allotted a piece of land for yourself. Now, obviously, land isn't the pure only thing that can attain ridiculous amounts of value nowadays. In fact, it would seem... I've just drove over a load of glass. Brilliant. Okay. In fact, it would seem like that it's our intelligence which really drives the most amount of wealth. Seeing that the people that go to study for computer science and create these amazing software apps and create these rapid virtual devices which can really save and increase productivity, and really try and work out ways in which to improve other people's lifestyles, maybe your Ubers, maybe your eBays, all of those little or those big website companies. The CEOs of those businesses seem to have the most amount of wealth that is drawn from them, and it's not really a case of these landowners anymore, which are these big rich people. So the theory doesn't really apply, because the theory is more to do with landowners, and landowners being the only really resource of value which is occurring in the world. And it doesn't seem to be the case nowadays that the land is the most important asset in the world. I know obviously it does produce all the foods and everything else, but it seems to be like the virtual realm and the intelligence realm is the area of which the most amount of money can be made. So, yeah, I would refute Karl Marx's arguments in those respects. Now, okay, we could go down the route of saying, okay, well then there's the people that have got a monopoly on intelligence. However, I don't think that there is necessarily... I know that obviously people have certain aptitudes to other people in terms of intelligence, but I still think that if you can really get people's curiosity to go and really try to get people to learn and strive and love certain things, then regardless, well, to a certain extent, with a certain level of IQ, people can attain lots of knowledge and get themselves into certain levels of disciplines which can be marketable into the outside world. Okay, when things get rapidly, shit hits the fan, then obviously people are going to look a little bit more towards land which produces food goods more so than anything else. However, I would still incline that where we live in a world of technology, the technology is a very important factor, even in terms of farming goods. So if you are a software programmer and you can software program robots that can retract farm, like you can get the harvester to work on an automated system rather than getting the farmer to do the work for you. It is a rapid improvement into the realm of producing goods. So yeah, I mean, obviously I'm trying to tackle a few little things here, and there's a lot of issues occurring in terms of the zero-sum game, or the argument of the zero-sum game, where everybody has to be a loser and one person has to be a winner. I'm always of the theory that there is always an exchange going on much more levels than just the level of material, but there is exchange of value which hits a lot more other levels of morality and virtue and things like that. And there is something incredible in which, if you produce a product which does provide virtue, morality, and produces value and gives people things which they can attain certain levels of creating wealth for themselves, then you are providing an excellent product to the world, and you should feel really good about that. And as a byproduct, you will be rewarded with a certain amount of coin. But really, the greatest good that you would be providing would be the amount of wealth that you're creating for other people. I always think that byproduct will start to come, but it just takes a little bit of time before it starts to shoot down. It's not going to be a rapid, instant gratification thing. It's always just that slow build, and then you get a couple of up days, you get a couple of troughs, and then eventually something works. And it's a case of learning a little bit about failure, learning how some things work, some things don't work, and then we produce something that is beautiful for everybody, for us to live in. But in the realms of a pure moral world, where we can live in a voluntarist society, where we do not have people which manipulate the market or exploit the market for their own ill means, and they are in tune to create value rather than creating just a very selfish material world in which they try and accumulate wealth for only themselves, or maybe just very isolated for their very family. Life does expand a lot more beyond just your family. Obviously, your family is very important, but there is a lot of things of friends and things that you can do outside and to your community, which can strive for a better world. So, obviously take care of your family. That's your main priority, but there's lots of things that you can do in terms of your business arena, which can provide value for others. So, with that, I hope I've tackled a few of those little issues. Obviously, probably I'm going to have a lot of communists coming back at me, telling me how I'm wrong, but if you've got any other ideas or any issues in terms of what I have been mentioning here, please come back to me and I will try and respond back to you as quickly and swiftly as I possibly can. We can have a conversation about it. We can even go and have a conversation on an interview podcast. I really, as much as I sound like I like the sound of my own voice, I probably am a lot better in an interview situation rather than a monologue. But Hey ho, that's the way things go. Right. So, thank you very much for your time and listening and tuning in. Spread your wings, spread some value in this world, and we will be back very soon.